Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dominic Ledesma. I'm the president of the Political Science Student Association. Appreciate each and every one of you for attending today. Today's topic is going to be on last night's vice presidential debate between Walz and Vance. We actually had an event right across that Hogue Auditorium with the SGA, and we had a huge crowd size. So anybody who was there last night, I just want to give you a little round of applause. Thank you very much. It means a lot. We do have a couple announcements that we're going to make at the end of today's meeting, so please stick around if you want to hear about future events that we're going to be hosting. But as of now, today is just a normal CrossRoad. So.
Okay. For those of you who may not have realized that this event was going to take place here, we do this every Wednesday. We will, whether you were here, whether you intended to be here or not for this event, we will verify that you were here through an attendance sheet that we'll pass around in a few minutes. And if you put a faculty name next to your name, we will contact that faculty, assuming we can read your handwriting. We'll contact that faculty. We can't guarantee that you'll get extra credit, but we will let them know that you did attend the event. And we'll pass this around in a few minutes. So, and I think, of course, we'll send that around in a few minutes. So it doesn't have to go around now. And I think, of course, even though the focus is the vice presidential debate, I think we're really going more broadly on the presidential election in general. So I think the best way to get started is to ask how you all think the presidential election is going. It's a close race, certainly. Is one side, I mean, nominally we see that Kamala Harris is ahead by a few points in the polls. Does that mean anything? Is there a clear leader right now? What do you think is going to happen in November? Are there any things you expect to see between now and November? How enthusiastic are you about the race? Do you see differences between the candidates, et cetera, et cetera? And also, do you think that vice presidential candidates even matter? Okay, let's see, I need to loosen this up so I can, there we go, okay.
So an interesting point that I wanted to bring up is how close this race is, at least according to pollsters on the mainstream media. Kamala's leading in a majority of these polls, but if you look at, specifically I look at the Hispanic voter turnout right now. Historically, Democrats have won the Hispanic vote by a long shot. So Obama had 39% of the Hispanic vote differential. This is differential between Mitt Romney and Obama. He had 39% more Latino voters. Hillary Clinton, 40%. Joe Biden, 36%. Now Kamala Harris is literally at 14% with the Hispanic voters. That's a small margin of error right there. So in my opinion, you look at that, then you look at the number of male voters, and you look at that statistic, and Trump is leading with male voters, especially young white males. Then you look at the statistics for other minority communities, such as African Americans. Kamala's not as far in the lead as Democratic presidential candidates have been in the past. I think what pollsters are accounting for is mail-in votes. And so we're going to see something very similar to what happened in 2016, where it was pretty much a long shot, landslide for Hillary. And then at the end of the night, Trump started to win these votes. I think it's going to be a little bit of a flip. I think that it's going to look like the Republicans have the lead all the way up until the day after the election, because these mail-in votes are not going to be counted until after the election. And so I don't think that the election is as close as pollsters are making it seem. I think that they're accounting for the inevitable, which is going to happen. But in reality, if Republicans just start to vote early, and a lot of Republicans are worried about doing this because they think that their vote's just going to be thrown out, but they can still go back on election day for, I think it's called provisionals, just in case something does happen. But I really don't think that Kamala is as far ahead as people think that she is.
All right. The rest of you agree, disagree? What do you see? What do you see among your friends, among people you know? What do you see going on? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do see. I have looked at the polls, specifically with undecided voters in swing states, and I have seen these polls get very tight. I've seen a few polls have seen that in terms of undecided voters in swing states, North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, they're within the margin of error, which is about 2%. So it's really close, and it's very tough with these sort of undecided voters in these swing states because a lot of them they're not like sort of centrists who are looking at both sides. They're apathetic voters, like they don't care, or they might not even get up in the morning. And we're gonna see. Really, we're still a bit too early. We're not gonna see real like decisions being made by these undecided voters until like the last week, 2 weeks of the election, because that's when they kind of make up their mind, because they kind of vote on feelings really. So yeah, I've seen a lot of sort of just closeness with these sort of undecided voters because of sort of how much, I guess, apathy or just sort of uneducated sort of voters that we've seen.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say uneducated. I guess the best way to, I know what you mean, like politically advocate. A lot of these people don't really care about politics. And they're, right. And so I can see both sides of this. So a majority of my friends that I started college with dropped out. And I live in the Atlanta area. So when I come to school every day, I get an entirely different consensus than I do with the people that I hang out with on a daily basis. And so for these, like, I guess we can say these non-college educated voters, majority of them are leaning Republican is what it looks like, and they are apathetic. They're voting based off of vibes is what it seems like. But you go on to college campuses and you speak with educated voters, and you typically tend to see them line with the left. And so I think it is way too early, even though the election is only about a month away, it's still even too early to try to say, oh, my candidate is in the lead, my candidate is winning, because this election is not really, it's a typical election, which we have never experienced in our voting age. Like, we had 2016, which was the first election I could vote in. 2020 happened. Then I have the 2022 senatorial races here in Georgia. So, like, all of these are nationalized, politicized debates. This is, yes, nationalized, it's politicized. People are starting to become more and more polarized. And we're learning in class right now about how that divide is starting to stretch more and more. I don't think right now that, and I've said this before in meetings, like if you were voting for Biden, you're voting for Kamala. If you were voting for Trump before, you're still voting for Trump now. And they're really trying to attack the margins. They're trying to go for those center people, those apathetic voters. But we watched last night a very, very good debate, in my opinion, which Dr. Cavalli made a funny point. When you have a good debate, you have a snooze fest, and viewers stop watching, and it's no longer important. I think it's ironic how the moderators actually asked the vice presidents, hey, you guys are going to pretty much be the last in command. How do you expect to have any say or difference making? Both candidates gave their responses, and I will commend both candidates for being respectful. It was the first time in my life where I saw two people having a conversation and not yelling at each other, right? They were complimenting each other on policy, on certain initiatives. They were backhanded compliments, I'll be frank. However, I don't think that last night's debate changed anybody's mind. I don't even think anybody really watched it.
Yeah, go ahead. Speak up loudly because we don't have the microphone plugged in.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say that the debate won't change anybody's mind, simply because a lot of the other, I think, interviews and just random rallies that we're seeing from the candidates, it seems everyone's confused. So I think if anyone was watching that debate all the way through, which I think a decent amount of people did, just because we've only had technically one presidential debate with both of the current candidates. So I could see why people maybe would base their decision off of a VP debate, but I agree it was very respectful, and I think it's a little concerning that I feel like there was more policy laid out in that debate than there was in the previous one. Very concerning, actually. So, yeah.
Okay, can anybody look up, they usually give overnight ratings for these TV debates?
Advance one slightly. I mean,
No, well, yeah, okay, but not who won, but how many people watched. The last presidential debate was 50 or 60 million, I think. I would be willing to bet that the overall number for this is 20 million or less. Go ahead.
Yeah, something that I noticed with the debate last night is just the image kind of like the Kennedy-Nixon debate in a way, where they started off very respectfully, and well, not just like the age difference as well, but it was just, they seemed more cordial to each other, and it seemed more of instead of trying to say my candidate is better, they were like, my party is better, this is why. So it seemed more inclusive of everybody, instead of just saying, oh, my candidate's better, or this candidate is worse than mine.
Yeah, speaking of backhanded compliments, I think throughout the debate you saw each side, you saw each vice presidential candidate complimenting the other vice presidential candidate, but in a way that said, then why is your presidential candidate so different from you?
Yeah,
You know, yes, I agree with my fellow debater here, and that's, you know, and so why is your presidential candidate so bad for the country? You know, why are they not doing what you suggest?
a lot of the public reviews from it, just going through like Facebook, Twitter, this and that, they were saying that they think that this could be a new way into the presidential debates, because they think this could inspire future presidential candidates to debate more cordially, kind of.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a I forget what the, you know, I'm trying to think of a way to characterize it, but yeah, my take on this was that, as Dominic was saying, it was a good debate in terms of being a debate. They stuck mainly to the issues. They didn't engage in name calling. There was some fact checking going on on both sides. Both sides actually owned up to some things, right? Tim Walz saying that he was a knucklehead sometimes and he just made mistakes, and J.D. Vance saying my party needs to do better on certain issues and the like. But the fact that it was a good debate, what I actually said at the time was that it's a good debate, which also means it's a terrible debate. And that's because nobody wants to see a good debate. And that's a shame, and that may be on us, but that's what happens. I mean, it's the debates where people rant and rave and yell at each other and interrupt that really get people watching. We want to see, we want to see a wrestling match break out. So I'm not sure that this particular debate is going to make any difference. Again, in one way, I agree with you in that I would like to see this become the standard for all future debates. But if it does, nobody's going to watch them. Nobody's going to want to see them. And that's a bad thing. So the better they get, the worse they are in a very odd way. Were you going to?
Yeah. I've never seen a vice presidential debate, and it kind of makes no sense to me until you start to look at the presidential candidates and how they were arguing last night, like the points that you were just bringing up. It kind of makes it seem like they were saving face for the presidential candidates, as if they recognize that there's a lot of people that don't like Trump and there's a lot of people that don't like Kamala, so let's have their vice president speak on behalf of them as for what they're going to do instead. And I don't think that's necessarily fair, because it's not like the vice president is going to be the one pushing these policy initiatives. Yes, they do have input, but it really just seemed like they were mouthpieces for their candidates and trying to say the right thing to the right people.
Yeah, I agree with you exactly with that, especially with Vance. If you've seen him outside of the debate and interviews with Fox and whatnot, he is basically a sort of policy mouthpiece for Trump. As Trump kind of goes more into the conspiracy theories and rallies and more pleasing his own voting base, Vance is the one that's trying to sort of save face and appear more about policy and the more, I guess, policy and sort of that sort of style of the presidency. And I find that sort of I remember one point that he made during the debate, it was with, I think, paid maternal leave. And Vance ended up saying that you have to spend taxpayer money on, this sort of, I think, something like that. And that was sort of surprising, because you've seen from Trump and from a lot of people, a lot of Republicans, the absolute hatred towards spending, taxpayer money on, welfare programs. So definitely, I think he's definitely trying to sort of appear more appealing to these non sort of non-MAGA, sort of apathetic voters like we were talking about, to appear more saying that, hey, we're not crazy. But yeah, I see it as him trying to appeal to the masses.
Okay, you guys can fight it out.
I don't disagree. I do think these candidates are saving face. I just bring up the exact opposite point of Vance is doing the same thing, and Waltz is doing the same thing, and frankly, Waltz has Vance has a lot to defend, let's be real, but currently, with Kamala being in office with Biden, Waltz has a lot of other things to defend. All of these policies that he's talking about changing that aren't being changed now. I understand the vice president cannot go in and sign an executive order, and that's not how that works. But as you said, they can have an influence on some sort of policy, and I do still believe there could have been more. It's frustrating to watch all of these candidates run. I think I've said this before here. To watch all these candidates run on the same issue that none of them have fixed in the past however many years. So I think that's just the part that's a little infuriating for most Americans to watch. Thank you.
Yeah, something, like I agree with all y'all's points. Something that I noticed that J.D. Vance did last night is he directly attacked Congress in a way where he kind of pushed it onto the American people, saying, if you want change, you need to stop arguing about the president and fix your local representatives first. So he kind of, because he was saying, he was like, in 2020, Congress was focused on completely different policies than what could have been used for better resources, like policies and taxes, this and that.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with that. Being the 101st member of Congress, the vice president can reach across the aisle and have things accomplished. But with the Democratic Senate and a slightly more Republican House, there's no partisanship. There's no policies getting through. And Waltz did call out the Republican Party, specifically Trump, for impeding some of these to try to have something to campaign on, which has been brought up in these meetings before. But the exact opposite can be said just about Kamala too. I think Vance did a well job articulating a lot of sentiments that conservatives have when it comes to, hey, when you were in office, yeah, you're not the president, but you were the 101st member of Congress. You were the tie-breaking vote. Where are these policies? Why are they not getting pushed through? So I think there was back and forth. There was good banter, is what you can call it, I guess. The one thing that I did notice, and I thought was absolutely hilarious, and I had to ask Cavalli about this, and he explained it to me in a more professional way, so I'll explain it that way first, is that as a representative in Congress, Vance has a lot more time speaking in front of a national audience, and he's able to use that to his advantage. Waltz being a governor, the maximum he does is give a state of the state, which happens in the chambers of the state legislature. So he's used to talking to people in person, face to face. And you can tell that by their mannerisms and their body language. My dog's deaf in both ears, so I'm a big body language guy. And I couldn't help but notice every time that they disagree with each other's policies, Waltz would break his neck, look right at Vance, and be like, nuh-uh. And then Vance, on the other hand, acted like Deadpool, trying to break the fourth wall, and would just look at the camera and just smirk, like we can understand or hear him. And then I was made aware that there was nobody in the audience, so it was obvious that he was playing that to his advantage. And when you speak directly to an audience of millions of viewers, it resonates a lot more than, hey, this guy's focused on the debater. Obviously that's the point, but as Dr. Cavalli has said, a good debate is a bad debate. So, I think that the consensus right now is showing the opposite of what happened in the presidential debate. A lot of people, especially our age, just said that Kamala had won the presidential debate. And now we're starting to see online through Facebook, XYZ, people are starting to think that Vance won this debate. I don't really know if you can declare a winner of this debate. There has to be one, though. And so if y'all want to talk about that next, I'd love to.
I think one of the things I wanted to bring up related to some of this is that while vice presidential debates generally are not consequential and they don't really move the needle very much, they're very often famous for particular incidents or particular lines. And you can go onto YouTube and just search for vice presidential debates in the past, or vice presidential debate highlights. You wouldn't want to watch the whole things. But there are some classic things from the past. In 1988, for example, when Michael Dukakis's vice presidential candidate was Lloyd Bentsen, and George Bush Sr.'s vice presidential candidate was Dan Quayle. And one of the questions about Dan Quayle was how young he was. He was kind of the J.D. Vance of his time. And Dan Quayle in the debate tried to make the case that he was about the same age as John Kennedy when John Kennedy was elected president, to try and say that he's just as fit for office as John F. Kennedy was, who was pretty much revered as a very good president. And Lloyd Bentsen, who was much older, he may have even been 70-ish at the time, which back then was old, looked him in the eye and said, Lloyd Bentsen looked Dan Quayle in the eye and said, I knew John Kennedy, or he said, I knew Jack Kennedy, using the familiar name. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. And then he looked at Dan Quayle and said, you, sir, are no Jack Kennedy. And that was a big applause line. And that, by the way, that's another thing, is they had audiences back then, and the audiences would cheer and boo and whatever. And they would all, a lot of them were partisans who would do it on cue. They were trained audiences. And so that was a memorable moment. In 1992, there was another memorable moment, maybe more infamous than famous, when it was a three-way race, the presidency, between George Bush Sr. running for re-election and Bill Clinton running for election, and third-party candidate Ross Perot. And their three vice presidential candidates got together: Dan Quayle for George Bush Sr., Al Gore for Bill Clinton, and Admiral Stockdale, who was a retired military admiral, for Ross Perot. And at one point, when talking about who knows what, the economy, spending, government, left versus right, etc., Al Gore and Dan Quayle just got into this argument, talking over one another nonstop. The moderators lost complete control of the debate. They just kept going on and on and on and on, and nobody could understand what they were saying because they were just yelling. And James Stockdale, the Admiral Stockdale, the Ross Perot's vice presidential candidate, jumped in the middle and basically said, this is why people are looking for a third-party candidate, because they see the two parties just yelling at each other. And so I'm wondering, were there any moments in this debate that you think might be memorable in the future? I don't know whether you want to address that specifically, but whatever you want to say, go ahead.
I was going to talk about a related topic about how, especially in the modern day, you sort of saw it with Nixon and Kennedy, that's sort of where it begun, but you've seen that people, or the American citizen, has been able to have more of a quote-unquote relationship with the president, and that there is quite a difference between just reading someone's words and seeing them talk out loud, to see them interacting with other people, to see them visually. And I feel like that's played a vital role in recent presidential elections, where the internet and just all these other social media sites and everything else in general have sort of made people get a lot of their opinions from sound bites, from either seeing gaffes or from seeing like zingers or so on. And I mean, we could we could talk about how those aren't like fully representative of candidates, how people getting information from just these short snippets of like entire debates isn't an accurate representation of what the people were talking about. But the fact is that these are influencing opinion. And so it's really interesting to know that that is having an effect, and that's very notable, especially in this election.
What are the zingers? Were there any zingers or memes that have been produced from this particular debate? Yeah.
First.
I also tried to just pull it up, but there were two I can think of. The first one was, it was like Vance was asked a question about immigration, I believe, and then Waltz had a rebuttal, and then it went back to Vance. And Vance was like, yeah, I totally agree with what Governor Waltz just said. That's exactly why we shouldn't let Kamala, blah, blah, blah. And like Waltz could not have turned his head faster, and just like, you can tell it catched him kind of off guard. The other one, oh, it was, I don't remember exactly what Vance was talking about. I want to say it was along the same topics of the immigration because it feels like that was half the debate. But Waltz just started nodding his head like in agreement, and then as soon as he like caught himself, he like looked at the camera and was like pretending to, I don't know if he was actually writing, but it looked like he like had to catch himself and like regroup.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I 100% think that both men agreed with each other, and I'll commend Vince. He called out Waltz in a very particular way, and this is a big headline that I've been seeing all over social media, is that Waltz is trying to work with what he's got, essentially is what Vance said, that he has to act like Trump didn't do X, Y, Z. At the same time, he has to pretend that Kamala didn't do A, B, C. And so, yeah, that was a big headline for me. The one thing that had me dying laughing last night when I was watching it was when Waltz admitted that he made mistakes, because the way that he did it was just like, he was just like, yeah, I made mistakes, and then looked at the camera and it was just silent for like 10 seconds, and I was like, is nobody gonna say anything? I thought that was pretty funny. And one thing that I feel like is gonna be taken away from this debate compared to the presidential one is that like a lot of conservatives were concerned about it being a 3v1, the debaters or the moderators versus Trump and Kamala versus Trump. But with this one in particular, yeah, I think the moderators very much so tried to keep their opinions out of it. They fact-checked both parties, and even the parties on stage tried to fact-check one another. And with that being said, there was one moment during the immigration topic where Vance's time had run out. Waltz was able to give a rebuttal, and they gave Vance the opportunity to have a rebuttal. He started talking about specific legislation that he was disagreeing with, that Kamala had pressed. And the specific line that bothered me was, we don't need to know how the process of immigration works. And I was like, no, you don't probably, but the average American person probably should understand it, to have a more nuanced understanding of this issue, to really pick a side. Like if they don't understand what the problem is at all, and if you just say, immigration is bad, or if you just say, we need more immigrants, like who really like is gonna, I mean, obviously people can side off of just that. I mean, it's apathetic voters and whatnot, but you know, for those people that are really trying to decide on like who they should pick, I think it would have been a perfectly fair opportunity to allow Vance the opportunity to explain why their party, why his presidential running mate believes in what they believe in. And as you said, he's the mouthpiece of policy. He's like the one who can explain. He's like a translator. Have you ever seen the Key and Peele skit with Obama? And he has like a translator. It's almost like the reverse. It's like Vance is Trump's interpreter, one might say. So I thought that, I think that that's going to be something that gets brought up pretty soon here in the media. I'm worried that people are going to try to just say like, oh, it was another rigged debate. Like, no, I don't think so. I think they genuinely tried. But that one like offhanded compliment from the moderator, there's nothing more that I can't stand than a moderator not moderating. Like,
Okay, we're going to go over here. Remember to speak up because we don't have the microphone plugged in.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like whenever I hear it being brought up that the moderators are doing too much, it's a Republican candidate. No offense, just the trend I'm seeing claims that the moderators were against him. Trump did that versus Hillary. Trump did that versus Biden. He did it versus Kamala. He was fine when Joe Biden went up there and said, we beat Medicare, because it looked good for him. He wasn't going to say anything about, but I guess, and then, that's all.
I think it's a very good.
All right. We'll just work. Well, you haven't spoken in a while, so you go.
So,
And then we'll just go back and forth.
with like kind of what you said, saying how there's like that unprecedented reaction, response. There was a moment whenever Vance was explaining the abortion law and explaining it to her doctor. And this is, I think, like the second time he was almost cut off by the moderators. Waltz basically said, why does it matter? And basically the whole thing, Roe versus Wade, mind your business. Like, I don't know if anybody else caught that, but he was kind of aggressive in saying, mind your business. And then he kind of just shut down, and then the moderators took over.
Well, that's been one of his catchphrases.
Mm-hmm.
He usually throws in an extra word there, a mild expletive in the middle of that. But yeah, that's been one of his catchphrases, so that was a chance for him to use it there. He usually, one of the things he's been saying on the campaign trail when talking about issues like that, basically saying government should stay out. Mind your own damn business is what he's been saying on the trail. So that was a chance. Were there other? That's actually an interesting point. Were there other things where the two candidates were basically towing the party line or repeating, catchphrases or things that they are known for, that their presidential candidates are known for? Let's go quickly back and forth here, and then we've got somebody over here. Go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly respond to what you said about the Republicans feeling as if the bias is mostly towards them. I do think it's exaggerated, but if a party feels so strongly that that's the case, I think we have to really sit there and consider what makes them feel that way. This debate, for example, we could do the presidential debate, but that was really such a disaster. I don't know if it's researchable. But 22 minutes into the debate last night, Vance said something about using kids as drug mules, and at first I thought, wow, that's crazy. This is the next cats and dogs. So I was like, okay, let me look it up. Turns out it's very much true, but the moderator then went to Waltz and was like, hey, do you care to comment on this drug mules? And she said it with very much of the tone. So then I went on to, was it CBS?
Yes.
I went on to CBS's fact check website, and surely enough, they don't have anything claiming that this drug mule comment was fake. So it's weird that the moderator is sitting there with kind of a tone, asking Waltz how he feels about that comment, when she could have just said, hey, do you want to respond to what Senator Vance just said?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Did you want to speak? Yeah, you.
Yeah.
Don't look away. It's you.
Yeah, kind of looking at sort of catchphrases like this.
Yeah.
Definitely with Vance, it's immigration. That's been, Trump leads in immigration in the polls. And I know that Kamala has, I think recently went to Arizona for a border sort of talk rally conference there. So yeah, Trump leads in the polls when it comes to the immigration issue. I will say, with Kamala, she is trying to look at it in two different ways. There's the actual immigration process, and then there's the border wall, which are two very separate things. There's the way that people are processed as immigrants, asylum seekers, and then there's the actual issue of border wall. And Harris is trying to make her, I guess, claim more strong with that issue, but Trump still leads in it. But also with, in terms of Waltz, with his sort of talking points, of course, we have the national sales tax talking point with tariffs. That's been the biggest criticism of the Trump sort of candidacy from the Democratic Party. So those two are the really biggest things that I see in terms of talking points, is mainly Harris focusing on the economy, on the middle class, and of course Vance and Trump's campaign mainly focused on immigration and sort of the border crisis.
I would argue that they talk about the economy too, though.
Yeah, they did talk a lot about the economy, with a lot of issues, but in terms of their partisan sort of catchphrases, those are the two major ones that they've been writing on in the past since the election.
Okay, we're going to go over here, and then I might want to bring up a topic, or you wanted to speak to. Go ahead. Speak up.
I think another one was on the Israel and Palestine situation. I think both of them have very, Walls basically just repeated what Harris said, and Vance didn't, repeat what Trump said, but he didn't say against, he was further, I'm going to support Israel. So I don't think there's been either change on that situation.
Yeah, go ahead. Speak up.
Okay, kind of on an adjacent, one thing that I really noticed was them changing opinions based on basically trying to block things that the previous person had said. So the main one that I noticed was climate change and how Vance tried to say that Trump cares about climate change. During that section, I was like, he definitely had said multiple times that it does not exist, and just really trying to push that he didn't care about that. And just instances like that from both Waltz and Vance, just both trying to cover
Okay, we'll go back here.
Yeah, Vance's or Trump's choice of Vance for vice president at first I thought was a wild card, but now I see what the strategy is. Trump's the entertainer and Vance is the mouthpiece. Vance is like better represents the Republican Party in my opinion than Trump does. Now what that means I'm not too sure, but it's definitely like Trump can get away now with saying climate change is not real, and Vance is able to go on stage and say it's not that it's not real, it's that if you were actually looking at the issue and you started talking about offshore fracking and all these different agenda policies that they have. But the one thing that I did want to bring up had to do with the policies, like what the biggest issues are, what the catchphrases are, and I kind of do disagree. I think Kamala actually hurt herself and disaffected many voters just yesterday with the attack on Israel, like the airstrikes on Israel, because and this is just like how the game of politics works, but Trump immediately went to go speak with some official leaders to try to go discuss what the problem's happening. We have to recognize that the leader of Hezbollah has been eliminated. 23 out of 24 faction of Hamas are done. They're basically an insurgency group at this point. And Iran's proxies in that area have been almost devastated. So Iran feels threatened right now. It's clear, it's obvious. And Kamala went to the border for the first time. I commend her for that. And she had a photo opportunity there. And because of what you were saying earlier, how it's interesting how social media is playing an aspect in this, people are going to go online and see her happy and at the border and they're going to be like, see, she went there. But then the people with the other algorithms are going to see what's happening on the other side of the world. And I don't think that we realize if Iran goes to war with Israel, we will go to war with Iran as well. And so that is something that can actually affect men my age and women my age.
Trump has mentioned that he will wipe Iran off the face of the earth and whatnot. So yeah, he's getting kind of pro World War hawk-esque with his rhetoric.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to defend Trump, but I'm looking at the issue at hand in the Middle East, and it's destabilized at this point. And if it gets any worse, Iran is closer now to a nuclear weapon than they ever have been. That was the whole fake reason, I guess, we started the war on terror over there in the first place. I mean, yeah, we used 9/11 as a catalyst to get our troops over there. And we also used oil back in the 90s to start the Gulf Wars and whatnot. But this is very, very serious, and I don't think a lot of people are considering the fact that we are on the brink of another world war. It's not that Trump is saying we're going to wipe Iran off the face. This has always been Trump's strategy, and it's peace through deterrence. It's just be the biggest guy in the room, be the biggest dog in the room. I mean, when he met with Afghani leaders, Taliban leaders, he pulls out a satellite picture of his house. That is so uncalled for. That's something that you would see in a movie between some mob gangsters. He's playing a character, and that character worked on the international stage. I don't think many people respected him as a person. I think they respected his power as president of the United States of America and the ability our military has to devastate an entire country. It's not so much that he's telling Iran, hey, you go to war with Israel, if I become president, we'll wipe your country off the face of the planet. No. Why would we do that? Why would we do that? It's the regime type that Trump is disaffected by. And this is why I see him threatening the state. Because if he threatens the state, then voters can see, hey, he cares about Israel. Israel, I know this conflict is a huge voting point right now. But even Kamala has switched her stance, and she's in support of Israel right now, which has defected a lot of progressive and socialist voters. And so, this issue in the Middle East has nothing to do with our country, and, it has everything to do with it at the same time.
Okay, we're going to go over here for a couple of comments. Remember to speak up loudly because you're across the room.
Yeah, so Trump's third former national security advisor said that other world leaders were laughing at him at G7 summit. I wouldn't say he made us more respected. And I also wouldn't say that peace through deterrence is even a thing. That's just war. That's the justification for bombing civilians, destroying buildings. 40,000 people, civilians, that we know of are dead in Gaza right now, 16,000 children. So I don't think peace through deterrence, which Benjamin Netanyahu has been espousing, has been a successful campaign. You know, that they've been doing it for centuries and it has never worked. So, you know, I don't have anything else to say on that.
Okay.
It's very completely topic, a lot lighter. It's more like a pet peeve. Today, sort of like serious topic. But one thing that I keep seeing like Vance mention is like he's a hillbilly. He knows like the Appalachian Mountains. He's from Ohio. He was born in Ohio, and I feel like that never gets mentioned. But like his mom's side of his family is from Kentucky. But he lived in Ohio of all places. For them to keep mentioning that, but just a pet peeve.
Well, I guess it's hard to get away from what made you famous in the first place, I suppose. But go ahead.
I think it's funny how you say peace through deterrence is just a conservative talking point to get away with going to war. I want to look back over 100 years ago to Woodrow Wilson's 14 points in which he outlines the League of Nations to be peace through deterrence so that no other state will go to war with another state after how Germany disaffected the entire, not just Germany, but Italy, fascist Italy, and Japan in World War II. Like, the whole idea of the UN and of international cooperation is behind the idea that if you go to war with one of us, you go to war with all of us. And so that's supposed to deter people from going to war. That's why we have the issue with Russia and Ukraine right now. That's why we have an Israel-Palestine conflict that everybody in the world is concerned about. It's because we're supposed to work together through international cooperation, and there are certain factors like these neighboring countries that are trying to push certain agendas, certain narratives. And so it's not fair to say it's a conservative ideology, and it's not fair to say that peace through deterrence is not real. If you go into a bar, you're not going to mess with the biggest guy in the bar. Like, he's been drinking, you don't want to. It's social behavior. It's not political behavior in nature.
All right, I don't want to shut anybody down, but we are running short, and I think you want to talk about next week.
Yes.
So we're going to take two more quick comments. First you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, so it's actually, J.D. Vance actually said yesterday that Donald Trump's plan is peace through strength. So that was kind of attacking the peace through deterrence point. I didn't really look into what he meant by peace through strength, but it really seemed like a big talking point, and this was under the first question after his introduction. So I don't know if the Republican Party is necessarily switching their view on how we go as a world superpower moving forward, but I definitely feel that there's going to be a more untraditional approach to how we deal with foreign conflicts.
Okay. Last word.
So Donald Trump, in a debate against Joe Biden, called him a bad Palestinian. He used a nationality as an insult. So I think it shows the kind of uncaring, like his behavior of, I don't care about these people. And he also said if he had his way, he would wipe them all out. That is genocide. Alongside the genocide Israel's already conducting, that is further a genocide that we would be a part of directly with American soldiers instead of just our guns, our missiles. So.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about next week. We have a special.
A lot of very good points brought up, and I really do respect everybody for being cordial. Obviously, we're going to have differences of opinions, but it's important for everybody to be able to speak their truth and to be able to substantiate it with evidence. And so I do commend each and every one of you. Like, I have no beef. Like, it's just, this is life. This is politics. It gets ugly sometimes. And speaking of politics, next week, our meeting's going to be a little bit different. We do have posters up all around the campus, and we're trying to get promotional material on this signage. But we're doing what's called practical polls, and it's going to be downstairs in room 112 instead of right here. And we'll be starting here just to guide anybody who forgets or is unaware and not here at the meeting today. It's going to start off with just a brief introduction to the political science department, any faculty updates, internship opportunities, or new course offerings. Then Dr. Cavalli is going to tell you how internships work through the Political Science International Affairs Department. He was my faculty advisor when I did my internship in the spring. And speaking of which, we are offering now a senior spotlight. And so previously, senior spotlights were just articles that went on the school's website. Now we want students to come speak to students. And so myself and one other GLIP intern, the Georgia Legislative Internship Program, we're going to be speaking after Dr. Cavalli to explain to you the student perspective of internships. Following that, we have two special guest speakers. We have Chief Judge Magistrate Jake Maxwell.
Will Maxwell.
Will Maxwell. So I knew a Jake Maxwell in high school. Will Maxwell. And we also have Clerk of the Courts, Mark Pettit, who are both UNG alum or have worked with UNG as faculty, who are going to come and speak to us about their careers, what they did to get to where they're at, and how their major is related to what they do. So this is a really big event, and we're going to try to live stream it on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. So if you can't make it in person, at least try to catch it on one of our social medias. But I appreciate each and every one of you for coming, and have a great rest of your Wednesday, please.
Okay, and no, it's the phone is